Anjie Cho is a Feng Shui educator. She's guided thousands of people to harmonize their living spaces through the ancient practice of Feng Shui. Anjie is the Feng Shui expert at The Spruce, co founder of the Mindful Design Feng Shui School, co host of the Holistic Spaces podcast, and owner of Anjie Cho Architect. She's the author of two books, Holistic Spaces and Mindful Homes. Welcome to the podcast, Anjie.
Hi, Josie. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, will you share with us your pronouns and where you're located?
Sure. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm on Lenape land, which is Manhattan, New York City.
Nice. So, what is the story that led you to do the work you do today as an architect and a feng shui educator? And how do the two relate to each other if they do?
Thanks for asking that. I think in general, I always wanted to be some kind of artist growing up, and somehow that translated to studying architecture and moving into that field as a young adult. And I worked in the architecture field, and I found that um, while rewarding, that I felt it was really a wonderful thing to work with people in their spaces. Working in the corporate world and um, working for other people and working in the architecture field was really difficult. I remember thinking to myself in my late 20s, like, just thinking that this is all there was to life, just getting up, going to work all day, and then just going home. And it led me to a place where in my late 20s, during my Saturn return, which is when you're in your late 20s and Saturn goes back to where it was in Western astrology when you were born.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to reevaluate what was going on in my life. And I had a huge epiphany where I realized I was really depressed, and I needed to change my life. So I was actually in Thailand and I had a Reiki session. I didn't even know what Reiki was.
Oh, wow.
I didn't have any interest in anything esoteric or any kind of healing. But I had this session and it was a huge epiphany for me. And I realized that when I got back to New York, I needed to change things. So I started studying meditation
Mm-hmm.
and yoga,
Mm-hmm.
which then led me to start to consider, how can I have this more integrated with the rest of my life and with the work that I do, because I spend so much time working.
Right.
And so I started studying feng shui. And then at some point, like during the last recession, I got laid off. And then I just decided, like, a lot of things happened. Like, I couldn't get a job, but projects fell
Mm-hmm.
into my lap. And I was able to start my own architecture firm. And in tandem with starting to formally study feng shui in a 3-year certification program.
Mm.
And then my whole life shifted. So I began to practice feng shui and also start to practice more. Did I say practice architecture and feng shui? I don't remember if I said feng shui first,
Okay.
but I started to practice both around the same time. And, over the last decade, it's kind of been a lot of like, how do these weave together? How do they not come together? Where if you look at it from a bird's eye perspective, I'm working with people in their spaces and in many different ways.
Totally.
But sometimes if you look at it if you look at it with binoculars, very close up, or if you
Mm-hmm.
magnify the situation, a lot of times the feng shui and the architecture doesn't really correspond, because a lot of architecture is actually project management.
Mm.
And also a lot of feng shui teaching, which is primarily what I do now, is educate people on to become feng shui practitioners. That's also a lot of teaching, and not and teaching and transmitting feng shui, but it's a lot of modeling too, for people.
Right.
So yeah, so this is how it comes together in my life, and that's kind of the story in a nutshell.
Nice. Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, that's interesting that you say that because I thought actually architecture and feng shui seem to go really well together in my mind because, like you said, it's all about, you're like working with people in their spaces,
Mhm.
basically in different capacities. But that also makes sense that one of my best friends is an architect. And when you said most of architecture is management, I was like, yes, that's what I hear as well, that's a lot of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of practical aspects to working with people in their spaces, whether someone's an interior designer or an architect. You have to manage things. It's a
Right.
lot of things to create an environment for someone.
Yes, totally. A lot of logistics. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. That makes sense. So, what does feng shui mean and what is it?
So feng shui is a Chinese phrase,
Mhm.
and feng means wind and shui means water.
Mhm.
So feng shui is a practice that originally comes from China, but many cultures, I would say probably all cultures, have some practice in how to look at their specific location and their environment to see how as human beings they can live in harmony with the natural elements.
Mhm.
So the words feng shui just kind of point to some natural elements that we need to thrive, but also these elements of wind and water are also elements that always need to be in motion. Like wind can't exist if it's not moving, right? Wind, like
Right.
that's like the essence of wind, that it's in motion. And water, when water stagnates, it's it's very unhealthy. It's not life giving. There, the chi is depleted, and just frankly, no one would want to drink stagnant water, right? It would make you sick. So it's not
Right.
life giving. So I think those two words, feng shui, or the translation of feng shui, really point a lot to what feng shui is. And on a superficial level, just like with Chinese medicine, what you practice, or like
Mhm.
acupuncture people, or even with meditation people, or yoga, even anything, a lot of things. You
Right.
could think like, oh, I want to start meditating so I can be really efficient at work, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
same with feng shui, people on the superficial level may think, okay, I really want to know what crystal to put in the corner or what color to paint my wall,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that is part of it, but it's not
Yes.
the only part of it, and it's probably the most superficial part of it.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, and I love that you explain that so well in your book, which we're going to talk about. And I have it right here. It's such a beautiful book. For those of you who can see the video version of this, it's backwards, but here it is.
Oh,
It's
it's
so
not backwards
gorgeous.
for me.
Oh, it's not backwards for you. Okay,
No.
good. It's backwards
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. I love like the layout and the illustrations or, the photos and everything. It's just a gorgeous book.
Thank
Um,
you.
but I love how you talk about the mindfulness aspect of practicing feng shui. Like you said, it's not just about what wall color to use and what crystal to place. And also interesting that you said, brought up like the stagnation of water. We actually talked about that in a couple episodes ago with a different guest, how that can be so problematic. Like both of those, the wind and the water, they need to be, doing their thing and moving. And
Mhm.
yeah, so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that everyone has the same perspective of with about feng shui with that mindfulness connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I even look back at like my first book, which was written a decade ago, where I was also at a different place in my life where I felt like, oh, okay, I need to give people tips and things that they could do, actionable items,
Right.
and that's the
Right.
best way to help people. And because of the role that I've taken, like I've stepped into like kind of an educator role in terms of feng shui, and also the
Mm-hmm.
way that the world is changing in terms of like how you offer content and knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
not which I separate from wisdom, right? But
Yeah.
the world
Good
has
point.
changed. So yeah, so I'm not sure that everyone else has this perspective, but through my own practices as a Buddhist practitioner and a meditation practitioner and a feng shui practitioner,
Mm-hmm.
and teaching also meditation and feng shui, I've I really felt a calling to write this second book where it is actually my own perspective on feng shui, and that's the way I teach it because
Mhm.
that's the way that I understand feng shui. So I don't know if anyone else would agree with this necessarily
Right.
besides me and Laura, my business partner, but I think it's so important because it really goes hand in hand with Buddhist
Mhm.
principles and also meditation practices, like even that the idea of the stagnation with water or with
Mhm.
wind,
Mhm.
that's the same as the Buddhist principle. Like, okay, first of all, you don't have to be Buddhist to be
Right.
interested in feng shui, but
Right.
the Buddhist principle, which one of the Buddhist principles, like the foundational principles, is that when we start to solidify and view the world as being a fixed, solid thing, is when
Mm.
suffering arises, when we want things different than as they are, right?
Yes.
And that's the same thing as water not moving.
Right.
When you don't
Right.
move, when your body doesn't move, when water can't flow, when your thoughts, your mind and your heart can't be flexible, is when
Mhm.
we really go through a lot of suffering.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I just got goosebumps when you said that. Like, that makes so much sense to me, and I feel like this comes up over and over again while supporting folks on their fertility journey,
Hmm.
because people do get so fixated and kinda stuck on, that end goal of having a baby and
Hmm.
how we're gonna get there, and it's like and people do, experience so much stagnation, that I see in my private practice. So that makes so much sense that that would translate to feng shui and the spaces that they're in. And yeah.
Yeah, because feng shui also is this interesting connection between heaven and earth, what's visible and what's invisible. And so if we apply it to fertility, it's not just about getting your body into the right place where you can conceive. You have to also work with the invisible realm too. But if you neglect one and not the other, especially if you're already having some difficulty and challenges with it, you
Hmm.
kind of you can exacerbate the issue. And so we've really been conditioned to separate, like thinking,
Hmm.
if I can, like, right, if I take all the, like, if I do all the western medicine or do all the right things, why can't I get pregnant, right?
Right. Right.
But there's so many friends that I've had that they're very like western in that mindset, but then they
Sure.
finally gave in and like went to acupuncture, and then
Right.
they got they got pregnant right away, and they're like, what?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes. And what I see over and over too is that the invisible eventually becomes visible.
Hmm.
So in terms of illness or patterns of disharmony in the body, a lot of times they'll start in an invisible place, so it's a chi stagnation, and then that chi stagnation can grow to a blood stagnation, and then
Hmm.
that blood stagnation can progress to something more serious. So it is like if you ignore that invisible piece, of the puzzle, it can really cause a lot of harm, down the road if you're not taking both of those things into account. Yeah.
Absolutely. They go hand in hand, and we really like, I think we're going to talk about this, but we can really
Mhm.
create as humans a binary situation where it has to be one or the other, and these are not
Yes.
interconnected, nor are they interdependent, nor are
Mhm.
they um I can like look at them exclusively, but one they're two sides of the same coin.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. So good. So in your book, Mindful Homes, which I have absolutely devoured, and I've made so many changes, and I'm going to share with you what I've done
Oh,
in
good.
a little bit. Um, you talk about the difference between cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation. I really loved this. Will you explain the difference? This is something that's always on my mind as a non Asian person when I engage in Asian rooted practices. And I know many of my listeners will be wondering the same thing if they want to try some of this, some of these feng shui practices.
Yeah, I think it's also a question and answer and topic that's always flowing,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that while there may not be uh, like a written out answer for this, I think it's a great exploration to be curious about
Mhm.
because, first of all, I study many Asian practices and I am Asian. I'm Korean,
Right.
but I'm an Asian American. I was born here in the States.
Mhm.
And my teachers, most of my teachers are are Caucasian actually.
Oh, wow.
And but their teacher, my root teachers were from Asia.
Okay.
And I do have more and more Asian teachers from Asia,
Mhm.
but there's also like this interesting disconnect because I connect maybe more with American teachers because I'm Asian American.
Right.
So there's this interesting place I feel that I'm in where I'm bridging the two, the East and the
Mhm.
West, where I have kind of the cultural background because my parents immigrated here
Mhm.
from Korea, but then we were raised Protestant without much connection to these esoteric practices, and then they were reintroduced to me through a Western lens or a more modernized lens.
Right.
So it's
Interesting.
a question that I'm always thinking about, and I think that a lot of people consider, and I think that's the first step is to just to notice that is to
Mhm.
already be aware and appreciate that. And then I think also having curiosity about how these teachings were rolled out in like from the Asian perspective versus like the Western perspective. Some of
Mhm.
my Western teachers I've heard say like or we talk about like the Western medical community because my sister is a psychiatrist, right? So she
Okay.
went to medical school,
Right.
and I hear they say you see one, do one, teach one.
Hmm.
Have you heard that before?
No, what does that mean?
Okay. So you see a procedure, you do a
Okay.
procedure, and then you teach one. So it's
Okay.
very fast. Whereas
Interesting.
I feel that from the Asian perspective, there's a assumption, I think, that you spend your whole lifetime mastering something.
Right.
And so I would never call myself a master of something or having
Mhm.
mastered something. I would always say I'm a student.
Gotcha.
At least now, but and
Right.
I'm in my mid 40s. But maybe when I'm 99, that'll change. But if I reach that age, but I
Right.
think that there's some things to like to embrace like and be curious about like okay, this is different than I
Mhm.
understand it from my own cultural conditioning, and how can I be curious and appreciate different things because I think that like there's some practices that may be foreign like I take flower arranging class, Japanese flower arranging ikebana, and
Oh,
then
cool.
my teacher is from Japan, but
Mhm.
he'll do like really odd things from a Western point of view for teaching, like he'll just put your arrangement together for you like for your first class, and then you take it apart and put it back together, like
Oh,
you don't have
interesting.
any personal input.
Right.
Or the idea that you just do the scales over and over and improvise later, whereas
Mhm.
I feel like from the Western perspective you're expected to be very individual, to kind of do something unique all the time. So
Yeah.
there's kind of that those different perspectives and how to kind of work with both and acknowledge both.
Mhm.
So I think that's the beginning of how to culturally appreciate rather than appropriate. And then I think with feng shui, what I see a lot is the tendency to want to like people like give me the checklist, please.
Right.
Just give it to
Yes.
me.
Just tell me
It's
what
like
to do.
just give me a PDF, please.
Yes.
Just give me a PDF and tell me where to put that thing. And so and that's okay
Uh,
too if they're paying for a consultation or something.
sure.
But there's also like have curiosity about there's something more, or don't call yourself a master of something, and also suddenly say like I've trademarked my own version of feng shui, which a lot of
Mhm.
people,
Mm.
a lot of Westerners have done.
Mhm.
Caucasian Westerners, they're like, okay, I've just created my own school of feng shui and it's trademarked this way. So that's what
Right.
I think is a little bit of a cultural appropriation.
Yeah. 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 That makes sense for sure. Um, Let's see. You say that for most people, it feels safer to start with external shifts rather than internal ones, which I'm guessing is one of the reasons why feng shui is so attractive to folks, like we were just talking about. Will you explain how external change leads to internal change through the lens of feng shui?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I don't even see the external and the internal as separate.
Mm,
And a lot of people have been more open to this, I think, especially since we stayed indoors a lot during the pandemic, that people saw, oh, my space kind of is affecting my life because I'm stuck in here, right?
yes, totally.
But it's often easy for people to disconnect from their home or their external space, like they may be walking in through a doorway in and out several times a day where it can only open like 45 degrees. And so then
Mm,
imagine like you're walking through this doorway and you move sideways, you're always accommodating for this obstacle.
hmm,
And that affects your chi, that affects your life. And because it's something in your home, it's really easy to ignore it, right? Like just like how people get into these accidents, car accidents, like in their neighborhood all the time, because you just become so accustomed
hmm,
to what you're adapting to that it no longer seems odd.
right.
And so over time, that affects us. And then this other side of it is that, even in our written language, in many different cultures, one would say, like, I'm opening doors to new opportunities, right?
Totally. Yes.
Or like in the Jewish culture, I heard one time when I was at a synagogue, they said like, may the doors be wide enough to
Mm,
welcome those who who are looking for friendship and love.
right.
And so, or we talk about crossing thresholds. So we
Yes.
even have it in our language, in the
Yeah.
metaphor, in our language, in our spoken language and our written language.
Mhm.
And we actually physically walk through doorways, and then people don't realize, oh wait, when I'm walking through my doorway, I'm walking to the outside world, and there's this like some layer of boundary
Mhm.
from my inner life. And maybe when I walk through my door, I'm going into this outer realm, this outer layer, this outer mandala. And
Mhm.
so it continually, um, feng shui can give us an opportunity to see beyond just like the, I don't just beyond like what's literal. It's literal, and it's like heaven and earth. It's like the
Yes.
practical with the esoteric. It's
Right.
the mundane, like actually walking through a doorway. Or
Right.
but there's also like the artistic metaphorical side to it. So
Yep.
they're this, I don't see them as separate. They're the same.
Mhm.
And then if you are walking through this doorway every day and going sideways, that's going to affect your body, your physical
Mhm.
body. It's going to affect your perspective. And in feng shui, we say it affects the amount of chi that comes in from the outside world and your
Mm.
opportunities. So it's just on so many different levels.
Yes, I love this so much, and for folks who don't know, qi is energy, right?
Yes,
Okay.
chi is life force energy.
Okay.
And it's similar to like prana if you
Mhm.
study yoga. And it's also called ki in Japanese, and it's the
Okay.
life force energy that brings like in feng shui, it's kind of what we look at. We look at mostly how the chi moves through a space, whereas like
Mhm.
acupuncture, for instance, looks at how chi moves through your body, or
Right.
qigong is how your body chi connects to the earth chi. And
Right. Right.
mhm.
Yeah, this is something I love so much about Chinese medicine is kind of what you were just describing, where I think I've given these examples before in the podcast, but like I'll listen to people's language when they're speaking about what's going on in their life, and I'll try to superimpose that over what's going on physically. So,
Mm,
so sometimes, an example is a friend of mine who was actually seeing me for acupuncture as well was dealing with a full body fungal infection or like a yeast fungal infection. And we were talking about a coworker that was driving her nuts, and she goes, "But you know what? He kind of grows on you." And I was like, "Did you hear what you just said?" And she was like, "Oh my gosh." And she had all these just light bulb moments go off. Like, that is when it started, is when I started having this conflict with him. And, and then I had another patient who was going through a divorce, and he kept struggling with these occipital headaches, like headaches in the back of his head, around like the back of the neck area. And he kept saying, talking about his divorce, and kept saying, "But she's always in the back of my mind. She's always in the back of my mind." And I was like, "Yes, that's where these headaches are coming from."
Yes, and
Yeah,
that's where it's helpful to see how we're also interconnected with other people, because when you try to diagnose yourself and figure out what's going on, you can't see that. You can't step
totally.
outside and see that,
Yes.
and you're there an observer and listening, and your purpose in that situation is simply to hear, to
Right.
watch, to listen, to see what you've been trained to notice.
Mhm.
And and it's so helpful to have someone be able to point that out to you. And that's another aspect of feng shui, I think, is that,
Mhm.
and also the Buddhist connection, is that we're interdependent and interwoven, our and
Mhm.
we just like we need to have someone, people help us, people around us to support us, people to help us heal, to point
Mhm.
out things that we can't see. We also need our homes to
Mhm.
support us, because they're as alive as your friend or your future baby or your parents. So they're also an active participant in
Mhm.
your healing and your life journey.
Totally, totally. I've started, just after reading your book, I've really started looking at our house differently, and
Hmm.
interacting with it differently, and feeling and regarding it more of like its own entity, or its own spirit, and each room I'm thinking about differently. I mean, it really has shifted the way that I interact with our house. Yeah.
Oh,
With
I
our
love
home.
that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. It's been amazing. Um, in Mindful Homes, you share that the three most important areas of your home are your bed, your stove, and your desk. And I just loved this. And I was not familiar with this at all. Will you share what each of these areas represent and why they are so important? And then I'd like to share a funny story about my home office after that, if that's okay.
Sure. So, so I was talking to my publisher. She's like, "Well, why do we need to put the desk in here for a book called Mindful Homes?" And I guess
Right.
because for me, my whole life involved so much of my work,
Mm-hmm.
but I gave the excuse that like most people are working from home now, so that
Yes,
so she was
that's
like,
true.
okay, but so well, we'll start with that. So your desk represents your career,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't mean that it has to be a job, a traditional job. It could include being a parent, a stay-at-home parent. It could include being like a philanthropist or a
Mm-hmm.
volunteer. It could include being someone in between jobs, or it
Mm-hmm.
could be someone going to 9 to 5 job. It could be an entrepreneur. It just kind of looks at like, what is your path in life?
Right.
And because I'm also an entrepreneur, I think a lot about work. So, and I
Yeah.
work and I work with people who I train to become feng shui practitioners. So I think the desk is really important. So
Right.
that's what the desk represents, and it's also where you actually, often sit down and do work. Like I was on retreat a couple weeks ago, and I was like, okay, I'm going to try to do work, but I'm like, no, I need to be at my desk, because it's also not easy to type and write emails and do things when you're not set up in a place where you have the space to do it.
Totally.
So so your desk represents your path in life or your work in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then your bedroom represents you, because
Mm-hmm.
that's where you sleep. That's where you nurture your body. That's where you recuperate when one's sick. Where do you go?
Mm-hmm.
You go to
Mm-hmm.
maybe you go to your sofa, but you might also go to your bed. You probably go to your
Right.
bed. And you spend so many hours in your bedroom. Like if we look at the percentage of our life, is spent in our bedroom. It's also the
Mhm.
most private space. Like if I went over to your house, you probably wouldn't invite me to your bedroom first,
Right.
right? So
Totally.
it's usually just for you,
Mhm.
your partner if you have one, maybe a child,
Mhm.
but in general, it's the more private space. You wouldn't invite a stranger into the bedroom.
Right.
So, and also you spend this passive yin time. So yin is like the opposite of yang. If your
Mhm.
listeners don't know, like yin is like when you're kind of passive, it's connected to the moon. It's like it's darkness. So you're, when you go to sleep, you disappear. You go
Right.
into, you disappear, and then you
Totally.
suddenly wake up and you're back. So
Yeah.
you're in a different place, but your body is also very receptive to all the chi around it. So your bedroom represents you. So it's really, it's like the closest concentric circle to you. So in feng shui,
Mm.
we really say to don't forget your bedroom, to work on your bedroom. And
Mhm.
then the stove is where you cook your food. Even if you don't cook, it symbolizes
Yeah.
where you cook your food. It's generally where the kitchen is, and it's where we also have fire. It's like the hearth of the home.
Mhm.
And in many, many traditional cultures, there's always gathering around the fire as well, right? And
Totally.
it brings warmth. So it can nurture us. It cooks. That's a place where we cook food. So that represents our health, our how we nourish ourselves, which also leads to how well we can do in the world. So it represents our resources and our finances.
Mm. Totally. Yes, it was so clear. I think that's what I loved about that. It was like, okay, I can focus on these 3 areas and that will feel really life-changing, I think, to me. Um, my the funny story about my office is that, for the longest time, I'd say for the last, I don't know, 6 months or so, I've been looking for a chase lounge to put in my office because all I've wanted to do when I'm in my home office is take a nap. I'm like so tired. Whenever I would sit down at my desk, I just was like, I felt like all I wanted to do was go lay down. And I read your book and that section of the home office, and I was like, oh, okay, this is not how I should be feeling in my office. And so my desk was right up against a wall, so I was like staring at a wall. And you mentioned in your book, like if you're right in front of a wall, that may be how you feel like in your business, kind of like, just like stuck or like staring at a brick wall. And I wasn't in the command position, which we can talk about. So I switched my desk to be in the command position. And then I got a desk blotter that's orange to like wake me up and just kind of bring in that vitality, and to ground my workspace. And then I got a plant and placed some crystals in a couple spots that you recommended. And now I feel so much more energized, so much more inspired. I have gotten some other business opportunities that have come up that did seem like they were in direct, um, you know, like a result of this energy shifting. And you mentioned like if you're in the command position, you can see opportunities coming. And I have really felt that. And when I've tried to do work now at other places, like my clinic, for example, I just want to get home so I can work at my home office because I feel like so much more productive here.
Oh, nice. Yeah, because well, you asked about the commanding position. So
Mm-hmm.
that is one of the basic principles in feng shui, and it governs where you would locate yourself, for instance, at your desk, but also in those other two places
Mm-hmm.
that we talked about, like when you're laying in bed or when you're at your stove.
Mm-hmm.
And so the tendency is for people to put the desk in like the most efficient place spatially,
Yes.
which sometimes you don't have a space, so
Sure.
you can make adjustments for that. But
Mm-hmm.
the idea is that you would want to be able to see the chi, the energy coming into the space while not being directly in line with it, because when we have our back facing the door or the entry to the space, where chi or a person or danger or any
Mm-hmm.
kind of energy, we don't have to judge it. We don't have to say good or bad energy. Any kind of
Mm-hmm.
chi comes in, we can't see it coming. And we've evolved to be very frontally focused humans.
Yeah.
And so if you are in a place where you don't we maybe we feel it most in an unknown place, in a strange place, and you're set up, you're positioned so you can't see the door, and you heard the door open or you heard someone come in, you might be very startled. And
Mhm.
that actually, by putting yourself in a position where your back is facing the door, you're in a subtle or maybe a strong fight or flight response.
Totally.
And so, why not, if you can, position yourself so you have a little bit more relaxation instead of adding to the, we have enough anxiety in life. Why do we
Yeah.
need to add to that if we have the opportunity to easily just make a turn? So, I
Yeah.
mean, that's another way of like, that's another like metaphor, right? Like, how do we just make a turn in our life? So,
Mhm.
simply just turning your desk or turning your
Yes.
view or being open, like you said, to kind of maybe see some more opportunities,
Mhm.
then we can start to create new neural pathways for um, new shifts or new see things in a different perspective. But also, we physically on that on the practically and physically, we can see people come in and we're not going to be surprised or scared or nervous.
Right, right. Exactly. Yeah, I was not aware of the low level stress I was feeling until I shifted. And
Mm-hmm.
now, like, I am so much aware of like, what is that kind of, underlying feeling when I'm doing this or that, and how, it's really helped me to tune in on a, a finer scale, of what's happening in my body.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sharing this with my wife, and we were looking at her home office, and she was like, "Oh no, I can't, like, we can't move the desk in a way that's going to be in the command position." And I was like, "Don't worry, you can do a mirror, you can hang a crystal." So I know there might be some folks thinking, "Oh no, I can't like be in the commanding position." Like, what do you do if you can't? And then also, um, if you don't have a home office to dedicate a desk space to, what can you do there too?
Right. So if you can't place your desk in command, you can set up a mirror. Like,
Mhm.
I like to get the little convex mirrors, like the rear view mirrors, and set it up. They even have ones that now have a pivoting back,
Oh,
and you can
nice.
set it up so that you can see the door behind you with the intention that like, even though you cannot move your desk, that you can still see the door.
Right.
And I will say that there's a difference between I can't move my desk and I don't want to move my desk.
Yes, yes, you
So,
mentioned that.
and I'm sure you get that a lot, right? Like, when with
Totally.
the work you do, like, well, I don't want to take that, change this lifestyle thing,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
But and that's not my decision to make, right?
Right.
So yeah, there are corrections. Like, for instance, I have a big mirror on the entire back of my desk to work with that issue that you talked about. When you're staring at a wall, maybe you can't move
Mm,
forward in your business or in your life, and you're staring at a wall, you're stuck. So I
right.
have a mirror, so I have a wide perspective behind my desk as well.
Nice. Yeah.
And then so those are like the easiest ways to
Mhm.
correct commanding position. And then what was the other?
Oh, if you don't have an actual home office.
Oh, an
Yeah.
actual home office, right? So a lot of people have carved out spaces, and you do the best you can with what you have.
Mhm.
So all of this, and I think including with what you do with everything in life, you have to do the best you can with what you have. Don't start with a like, well, I can't do this, so then I'm going to give up.
Right.
I mean, you
Right.
can, but then that's all you have.
Right.
So so I work with a lot of people that, especially now, are working from home, or have shifted to working from home, and simply don't have a space for a home office.
Right.
So my solution to that was what you alluded to, getting a desk blotter. So you can
Mhm.
find them very easily online. And I think they just look nice
They
anyways.
do.
But it's it brings in the earth element. It gives you like
Mm.
a little rollerway desk. So wherever you are, you could be on your coffee, like at the coffee table, or sitting on your island or your dining table, you could roll this desk blotter out, which is usually a rectangular shape, which
Mhm.
invites in the earth element. It's also flat, which is earth element. And create your own little temporary desk. And it's also in if you meditate too, like off like at my meditation center, we have like zabutons that are like it goes under your meditation cushion, so it's like a square, it's a
Mm,
seat. It's also
nice.
giving you permission to take a seat,
Yeah.
to take up space, to that you belong
Mm,
in whatever you're doing in this world. You belong in this world. You have a place to put your feet down, you have a place to put your computer down, you have a
right.
place to make your mark, and you don't have to always be up in the air. So you can ground yourself. You have permission to take some space on this earth.
Yeah.
And then you put it away when you don't need it.
Mhm.
So, and then the color, you can pick a color based on one of the elements, and you picked orange, so I'm assuming
Mhm.
like a fiery orange to bring in
Mhm.
a little bit of fire. And you
Yeah.
probably like orange too, right?
I do. I do like
Okay.
orange. Yeah, I noticed it's in all my branding, and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." I've been really gravitating towards orange
Yeah.
lately.
Well, your logo's also kind of like an earthy orange too.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a little bit like well, at least the little icon I'm looking at, it's like a
Yeah.
little bit of a terracotta. So it
Totally.
has earth and fire. And yeah, it has
Interesting.
earth and fire.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, totally. I know, I am obsessed with my desk blotter. I, like, haven't used one of these since the '90s probably, or maybe '80s. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, desk blotters." Like, I forgot those were a thing, and I just love mine. It really has changed the whole vibe, and you can use it as, like, a mouse pad. You don't need a mouse pad anymore.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love them. I love them. And I just had to come up with a solution because so many people were like,
Right.
"I don't have this." And so it's just what I've come up with over the years.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, and then with my stove too, I think the mirror trick and, you talk about hanging a crystal to diffuse that energy. There's more details in your book about that. Um, but that has helped me too with the stove because, like, you can't always move your stove. So we're just, our backs are to the, our back door that leads out
Mhm.
to our backyard. But yeah, so I'm going to put up some mirrors, but I have been keeping the stove area clear. I've been like storing the pots and pans instead of just letting them sit on the stove. And I've been like wiping down the stove much more than I used to. And it does feel
Nice.
so much better. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's like practical sides to this too. When you have a clean stove, your food is
Hmm.
healthier,
Yes.
and then also you're attending and giving a lot of care to a place where you create food to nourish yourself. And I talk about my book how it's a place where you create alchemy. You're
Hmm.
making, like, you're cooking food, which is actually kind of a big magical thing, right?
Yes, totally. Yeah, I love that. So will you explain what the Feng Shui Bagua mandala is, and its origin story? I thought it was so beautiful reading about how that came about.
Well, I don't okay, so the bagua is I call it a mandala because it is a mandala,
Mhm.
but it's and I think that's actually a better description than a map, but it's also sometimes called a feng shui map.
Okay.
And it's a 3 by 3 grid, but it can also be a pie, like a 8 sectioned pie,
Okay.
8 sliced pie.
Okay.
So, um, and
Mm.
ba means eight, and gua means area, direction, or that kind of feeling.
Okay.
And it's what one of the tools that we use in feng shui to read the energy of a home. So
Mhm.
it can be overlaid like this mandala, because
Mhm.
I've painted and studied mandala painting in the Vedic discipline and in the Tibetan Buddhist disciplines.
Oh, cool.
And it's this idea of a center that radiates out. And it also kind of gives us an understanding that there's this interconnectedness again, that we're connected to a center, that
Mm.
there's degrees of influence, right? And that
Mhm.
they all connect with each other. So anyways, in these so it's 8 areas around a center, and the center represents health and well-being, because it's connected to, it's the center. It's connected to
Mhm.
all the different 8 directions or 8 sections around it.
Right.
And then each of the other areas represent different life experiences, different elements, like the from the Chinese 5 elements,
Mhm.
different shapes, colors, and you'll be, I don't know if oh, I did talk about it in the book, organs, body parts, like
Yes.
so many, it's just, the list is infinite.
Right.
So it's a tool that we use, that we overlay on a home to give us information.
Mhm.
And I don't know, think I talk about where the Bagua comes in the book, but it does come, I mean, I give this little story about like chi, it starts with chi, which is 1,
Mhm.
and we could visualize like a seed that
Mhm.
splits into, that cracks open, splits into 2, like yin and yang, and then it can it can unfurl into the 5 elements, which then opens up further into the Bagua,
Right.
like a lotus flower.
Yes, I
But
love that.
originally the story comes from legend, where there was a tortoise that came out of the river, like came out of the Yellow River with the markings on its back, and this connects to the I Ching.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And there's these trigram connections and number connections on the markings of the back of the tortoise, and then that later evolved into the I Ching and the trigrams and the Bagua, which,
Oh, wow.
they're all related.
Okay. Mhm. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I didn't know that story either. I just loved the visual of the seed, as 1 and then breaking into 2 and then that breaking up more. Was it into the 5 elements and then to the Bagua, or was that maybe the 5 elements weren't included? I'm
Maybe
trying to
they weren't
remember.
included, but it can't, but
Okay.
it's still like this unfolding, because it's like,
Unfolding. Yeah.
yeah, and that actual visual came to me when I was in last fall, when I was in France, and I was looking at an acorn and talking to my
Mm.
flower teacher about, my flower meditation teacher, about just about seeds and flowers, and how, um and I also like where I am in my life, like, look, am I the acorn? Am I germinating? And then what are my teachers, like the elder branches that are now almost touching the ground? And how
Wow.
does this unfurl into the same thing, everything that we do in our life?
Mhm.
So the Bagua, that story of the Bagua coming from like the visual of the seed that breaks open and unfurls into a 8 petal lotus flower, we can look at that in so many different ways of our life, like from morning to night can be that
Mhm.
unfurling, from in the seasons of the year can point to that unfurling, the seasons of our life,
Yeah.
as we grow older, all of those things, are great metaphors and
Yeah.
teachings for us.
I love that. I love that so much. Yeah, so that's okay. So just to recap, the Feng Shui Bagua mandala, or the Bagua map is what we use to kind of overlay on a room or a space or a rectangular area or a
Hmm.
house. You kind of
Oh, I
just
didn't talk about that yet.
yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Okay, I'll explain that. So it's in the
Okay.
book, but so most people who do know what the Bagua map is, they maybe only know that they can apply it on their home.
Right.
But it can also be like a mandala, like there's a center and it expands. It can be expanded over your whole home, but it can even go further to cover your whole property.
Yes.
It could go further and encompass your whole neighborhood, your block, your city, so forth. And then it can
Mhm.
also go smaller to just your bedroom,
Mhm.
and then, or your office, or smaller to just your desktop
Mhm.
or your bed. And the reason why I created in my book a Bagua mandala overlaid on a bed,
Mm.
and also talked about it with the desk too,
Mhm.
is because people don't always have rectangular shaped homes, but they usually
Yes.
have a rectangular shaped bed.
Right.
So
Right.
so it was my effort. It was like my effort in hopes to give people something to that they can actually apply without needing me. Because
Right.
because one of my intentions too is not to be in any kind of role where people think I know more than them and they
Mm,
need me
right.
to answer their questions, because I can be a helpful guide and I
Mhm.
have more experience, but I can't help every single
Mhm.
individual. So, and what I found was people like stopped. They're like, I
Mhm.
don't know how to do this, so I'm not going to do anymore. But
Right.
but a lot of people have given me feedback like, oh, this like bagua layout on the bed is really interesting, and it's actually very welcoming, and it invites
Mm.
people to have curiosity
Mhm.
about about what the bagua is, and to
Mhm.
see beyond like, oh, it's I don't just have to learn how to apply it to my house, because so many people get really stuck on that, but how
Totally.
can I use this in a personal way? How can I use this in a way where I don't necessarily have to go to an expert?
Mhm.
And how can I then maybe that'll open up more curiosity to learn how to actually lay it on the house, but there's lots more to learn if you want
Yeah.
to lay it on a house, unless it's like perfectly
Right.
like a rectangular shape.
Totally, totally. Yeah, I found that so helpful. And then each sort of area in the Bagua corresponds to like a certain area of life.
Hmm.
So then you can kind of overlay that on something and use what you've learned, in your book to make adjustments, based on where it falls in the Bagua. Yeah.
Yeah, because in reality, the Bagua teaches us also like there's an orientation, there's a front, there's a back, there's a center.
Mm.
And where does a chi come in? Because it's oriented based on where the energy comes from. It's always oriented based on the primary door or the official formal front door of the space.
Mm-hmm.
And like for a bed, if the listeners are curious and they don't have the book, the bed would be the foot of the bed.
Mm-hmm.
But there's already things that are in place in our reality, in our
Mm-hmm.
world, where something that's where the energy comes in and is closest to the door is maybe related to more outward things, more external
Right.
things like
Okay.
career.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the furthest, the guas or the areas that are the furthest back are like your prosperity and your wealth, or
Mm.
your primary relationship.
Okay.
And that's
Interesting.
why those are positioned the furthest back from the bottom or the front of the bagua. So
Okay. Oh, that's interesting.
there's many nuances. So there's like, so if you start to kind of have curiosity, like, why is this here? Why is that there? And what does
Mhm.
that mean? And then how does that align with where the chi comes in?
Right, right. Oh, that makes so much sense. That's so interesting. So I know a big question that is on people's minds who are listening is what do folks do from a feng shui perspective to increase conception, chances of conception, or to begin a fertility journey or to have a positive outcome from a fertility journey?
So I think one of the first things that we always say when there's like a physical health, it's kind of like a physical health concern, right? So for
Mhm.
any kind of physical health thing, it's always important to not um, only rely on something esoteric like feng shui.
Right.
Um,
Sure.
to always consult with medical practitioners, but there are things that you can do in conjunction, in tandem.
Mhm.
So again, always connecting the heaven and earth, and visible and the visible, like seeing that these are not disconnected.
Right.
um, but you can look at your home. So I would definitely make sure your bed is in commanding position, so
Mhm.
you're not adding that extra level of fight or flight in when you're sleeping, so your body can rejuvenate while you're sleeping and you can heal. I
Mhm.
would also say the same probably for the stove and the desk, because when if you're not in command while you're cooking at your stove, I talk about this in the book, but you can actually be putting like kind of like fear into the food that you're cooking food and you're stirring in all your good chi. But then if
Mhm.
there's this level of fear, you're also kind of stirring in that fear, which may be a hindrance to conception, creating
Right.
new life.
Right.
In the bedroom, there's a few things that, like in general, that are kind of mundane. We call them mundane adjustments to do,
Mm.
like, uh, which might kind of sound weird, but you're not supposed to clean under your bed. You're
Interesting.
yeah, so you're not supposed to clean under your bed because there's like Ling particles, they say Ling, Ling particles that ideally, so this is regardless if you want to conceive or not,
Okay.
you ideally want to have space all around you when you're sleeping. So you don't want to have like a platform bed or a lot of storage under your bed or like a storage bed. That's not
Mhm.
ideal. I mean, if
Okay.
that's what you have, that's a different conversation. But ideally, you want to have the chi flow around you smoothly to nourish you while you're sleeping.
Hmm.
And then you don't want to clean all the dust bunnies under your bed. I mean, within reason. But the idea is you want the Ling particles to collect under your bed because that's where that new baby can come from. The
Huh.
Ling particles, the Ling particle goes into the fertilized egg, I guess, and creates life.
Interesting.
So don't clean under your bed. And then also once ideally, because your bed, your home represents your body.
Okay.
So it's like, like the walls or your skin, and I talk about this in the book, the
Mm,
different organs. But there's also
right.
a lot of different nuances. Like your nervous system is like your electrical system, your lymphatic system, and your urinary systems are like the plumbing. So
Oh,
you want to make
interesting.
sure everything is in working order, but you do not want to do any construction on your home while you're trying to conceive. And
Mm,
especially you do not want to do any construction in your home if you are concerned about I don't know how you say it, but because I haven't had a baby, but if you're concerned about like holding the baby, right?
mhm.
Not losing
Like,
the
maintaining
pregnancy,
the pregnancy. Yeah.
maintaining the pregnancy. So
Mhm.
so if there's a concern about maintaining the pregnancy,
Mm,
this is especially something to pay attention to, is to
mhm.
not do any kind of structural work in your home, because that's actually like it's like doing surgery on your body while
Interesting.
you're holding a pregnancy.
Right, right. Interesting.
Yes. And if you work with a qualified feng shui practitioner, there's also like, especially like I study and teach BTB feng shui.
Mhm,
There are specific what we call transcendental adjustments that can only be really passed from practitioner to client or
mhm.
teacher to student that someone can offer, but they're really convoluted, and I've given it to people and no one's done it. So so they're like getting, it's like getting a rice bowl, leaving the rice bowl dirty under the bed, like putting in lotus
Interesting.
roots or lotus seeds and all this stuff.
Oh, wow.
um but there's also a sense of calling in the yin energy, the
Mm,
mother energy, as well,
mhm,
like Kuan Yin, which is the
mm.
goddess of compassion, which is also Kuan Yin is like also non-binary, so it's not just goddess, uh,
Nice. Yeah.
Kuan Yin is in feng shui. We use Kuan Yin to bring in the quality of the moon, and so you could also explore the yin chi of the moon,
Mhm.
and ask for help and support from Kuan Yin.
Nice.
And I think that's the main thing, is like don't clean under the bed,
Okay.
um,
That's so
and don't do
interesting.
construction.
And don't go do construction.
Oh,
That's yeah.
and then people could also activate, there's an area of the Bagua map. And if you have my book, you can use, it'd probably be really helpful to actually do it on your bed. And
Mhm.
if you can, in your bed, this area of the bedroom and this area in your house. So on 3 levels.
Okay.
But there's an area that's called Dway, which is related to completion in children.
Oh, yes. Mhm.
So that one can be activated. Or you could also maybe activate new beginnings as well. Maybe those two,
Mm,
actually, maybe those two areas, Dway and Jun. So Jun is new beginnings, and
mhm,
that's family.
mhm.
And then also activate Dway, which is children and completion. So it's like spring and fall, because they have to work in tandem
Right.
for new life. You need something to end in order for something to begin, and you need something to begin in order for something to end, and those feed
Right.
each other.
Oh, that's so interesting. I'm glad you said that because as I was reading your book, I was thinking, huh, would people use that one or this one? Because yeah, they both seemed related to creating a family. So that's yeah.
Well, that's a good question. Like, I wonder what you would think from your background, from a Chinese medicine perspective. Like, because are there people who require like because these are equivalent to wood and it's yang wood and yin metal, those two
Mhm.
areas. And so I
Mhm.
wonder, like, some people maybe need more metal and some people may
Totally.
need more wood. And
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, they could really zero in on one or the other depending on what's going on with their physical, patterns in terms of 5 elements. Yeah.
yeah, and there's also actually another area, which is the relationship area. Is also, it's called kun. It's
Mhm.
related to the mother.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
so it's also the reproductive system. And so that's
Okay.
also maybe an area that one could activate on their bed
Okay.
for support.
Okay.
And so I think it would be probably helpful if someone's having con- who's looking to conceive and they may be having some obstacles, is to see, like, where are those obstacles coming from? Like, is it
Mm.
from, is it connected to the reproductive area? Then maybe that
Mm.
position
Right.
needs support.
Right, totally, and it's like, are we having trouble getting this started? Then you would go to the
Yes, to new
beginnings
beginnings.
area.
Yes.
Yeah, are we having problems, like, bringing this in, to complete it, and then, go to
Hmm.
that completion area? Or is it more of a reproductive issue? Then go to that
Exactly.
other area. And in terms of the word mother and mothering, that could really apply to any gender. It's just that energy of mothering, right?
Right. Because it has nothing to do with the gender. It just means that it's, well, it does in a sense that it also relates to your mother,
Mm,
but it's
interesting.
like but it's also giving life to something, right?
Right,
And
right.
it's yin earth, actually. So yin
Okay.
earth is it's the receptive. So if one looked at the I Ching, it's like the receptive, it's like three yin lines.
Mhm.
It's like the shape of a bowl.
Okay. Oh, I love that. That's so cool. Oh, this is so interesting. Yeah, and for all of you who are like, What are you talking about?" Like, just get Angie's book.
Sorry, are we getting too esoteric?
No, no, I'm
Okay.
following, and this all makes sense, but I know that if someone's new to feng shui, it may be like, "Wait, what is this?" What are these different
Oh,
terms or
well, we could
bagua?
say, well, what would if you had to pick one area that most people you think may need to work with on their bed, or should I just point out all three areas, or do you think one of them would be more helpful?
No, I think all 3 are really good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the way that you explained to Josie is, so if someone, like, if the issues conceiving have a lot to do with actual reproductive issues, like physical issues, or maybe it's also wanting to be a mother, or to mother something too
Mhm.
much or too little, or having
Mm.
like some kind of obstacles around that, if that's it, and also like being more receptive to it, then
Mhm.
that would be the relationship area of the Bagua map. And if you were going to lay that on your bed, so you would be standing at the foot of your bed, divide your
Mhm.
bed into a 3 by 3 grid like a tic-tac-toe, and
Mm,
it's the
mhm.
far right corner of the bed
Mhm.
by the headboard on the right
Okay.
side if you're standing at the foot of your bed looking. And then we were talking about if things need to get started. You just really want to get, like, you need help getting this stuff started, getting
Mhm.
getting things in motion, and you need that energy for that. That could be the new beginnings area, which is related to family. And on the Bagua
Mhm.
map, it's also green. Oh, the relationship area is pink.
Mhm.
The green area, so if you're at your bed, you're standing at the foot of your bed, and you have that 3 by 3 grid in front of you. The left side in the middle
Mhm.
is
Okay.
that area that you would work with. And then
For new
if it's
beginnings.
for new
Yeah.
beginnings, and if you
Mhm.
need to, like, really kind of like have the have things complete, or if you really want to, like, activate children, which is kind of a good one to activate in general if you're not sure
Mhm.
about the other two.
Right.
That area is white on the Bagua map. And if you're standing at the foot of your bed and you're looking at the 3 by 3 grid, it's the left side in the middle.
The right isn't it the right side?
Sorry,
Or
the right side. The
okay.
right side is, I'm a little bit like at the right and left mixed up.
No
Um,
worries.
so yeah, so the right side in the middle, but you're following. So good.
Yes, I'm
Uh,
following. Yeah.
and then, because I have to, like, think about it while I'm
Yes.
talking.
Yeah.
And and so then someone, your listeners might say, well, but okay, yeah, I know, now what do I do?
Right,
So
right.
you could use like the simplest thing. If you're not going to get the book or do anything more,
Mhm,
you could use the color of that bagua area to activate it. So you could put like something pink
mhm,
for a reproductive thing. You
mhm.
could put something green if you need the energy to get things started, or you can use white if you just want to, if you just want to activate children and
Right.
get this completed, and put something of that color, like let's say a crystal of that
Mhm.
color, in that area underneath your mattress.
Underneath. Okay.
So it could go under your mattress, between your bed frame, in your bed frame, or it could go like
Mhm.
on the floor underneath. And I
Okay.
wouldn't do all three areas. I would just pick one. And so
Mhm.
pink would be the far right corner,
Mhm.
green would be the middle left side,
Mhm.
and the white would be the middle right side.
Okay. Love that. That's so
Hopefully people
simple.
will follow that.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
I love that, thank you. And, I was thinking too with the relationship area, the pink area, I think for queer folks especially, sometimes that can be charged. You mentioned, like, the relationship with your own mother. I know,
Mhm.
a lot of queer folks I work with who are trying to start families with maybe not necessarily the support of their family,
Mhm.
and maybe
Mhm.
having some, concerns there about starting a family and bringing another person into this dynamic and maybe not having that support of, closer or extended family. So there can definitely be some, energetic blockages there for queer folks in particular. So that's a good one to activate.
Yeah, I think so too.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, how can people find you and support you and buy all your things?
Well, my book, Mindful Homes, is available wherever books are sold. I also have my first book called Holistic Spaces available, and also wherever books are sold. And I teach Feng Shui, a Feng Shui practitioner's training program at mindfuldesignschool.com. I own that school with my business partner, Laura, and we train Feng Shui practitioners.
Oh,
We
cool.
also have a podcast called the Holistic Spaces Podcast, where
Oh,
you can
nice.
learn more about Feng Shui.
Okay, great. And I will include all those things in the show notes for folks.
Thank
All
you.
right, Angie. Well, thank you so much for being on here today. I learned so much. I was like, I've already learned so much from you, from your book, and I learned even more today. So thank you so much.
You're welcome, and it was so fun talking to you because you, as a acupuncturist and Chinese medicine practitioner, you know what I'm
Right.
talking about. So this
Yeah.
is not new to you, but I really appreciate that you're offering this for people to understand
Hmm.
wherever they're coming from.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, thank you.